Welcome to Legends at the Table, where we sit down with legends to discuss the games we love. Today we're with the legendary BDaveWalters. The undisputed Baron of the Valley, Victor Temple, as you're known in LA by night, also known for the Black Dice Society and author of IDW comic Dungeons and Dragons: The Darkened Wish.
That is true. That is all things. And you've heard the dozens and dozens of my fans cheering as you're given the credits. Hello, hello, hello.
Welcome in, friend. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to do this. I wanted to start with something I always ask everyone here, origin story. So how did you get into tabletop RPGs to begin with?
I was there 3,000 years ago when the Deep Magic was written. I'm way older than I look. I've been playing these games for over 30 years, nearly 35 years. I got my start with Riffs, actually. That was the first game I played. And then once I got into that, a buddy of mine was a hipster before hipsters were hipsters. And was like, well, if you're going to play one of those games, you need to play D&D, the OG. And started playing second edition and never looked back.
Perfect. It's second was about where I got involved as well. So it seems to be a fairly common thing. So how long was it before you kind of got into the point where you were GMing, or were you there right from the beginning? Was that kind of your...
I definitely played first, but my initial exposure to D&D, especially, is it was just the two of us, and we'd take turns running the game and playing the game. And that was why I got used to running like one-person games early, because those were the first games I ran, or one-person games. Yeah. And we just took turns. My first character was an elven fighter mage thief that was based on Vampire Hunter D. And yeah, very on brand. Yeah, so right from the beginning, I was doing both.
I'm not sure where most people found you, but I found you originally in LA by night. What led to that? Indeed.
Always got to represent for Clan Ventru.
Indeed.
You know, the books back there. Although the one I actually played with on set is that one right there. In December of 2017, was still at Geek and Sundry. There was a charity function that was going to do a vampire one-shot, and I played in that, which was my first time playing in a TTRPG on stream, and Jason Carl ran it, and it was his first time running a game on stream. So both of us did vampire for the first time like this in December 2017. And so I went all in. I did the costume, I did a voice, I like really leaned into it. And he and I ended up becoming friends, and LA by Night went into production later that year. And if everybody that was on that charity one shot, I was the only one that ended up on the main cast. And so I was just
nice.
A fortuitous sequence of events.
Very cool. Did you have much experience with vampire prior to that?
Again, I was there when the Deep Magic was written. All of that stuff in the 90s just landed on my face. Gotcha. Although werewolf was my first love, because when I had to choose between being like a 7-foot rage monster that could throw pickup trucks, you know, or just like this ageless twink overcome with ennui, I was like, point me towards the rage monster. I got into vampire a little later, but Clan Ventru was always my first love. I was Shadow Lords for the werewolves, and then Clan Ventru for vampires.
Yeah, I noticed that pretty early with you in LA by Night. You seem to roll into the lore very intuitively. So I'm like, either this guy did a lot of studying right before the game, or he's very familiar with the setting already.
The answer is both.
Both, okay. I also I said this to friends a couple of times. I think Victor Temple, to me, is like the perfect definition of what would be a Ventru in the Anarchs, right? Someone who is just, he was relentless, like, and he was very confident in what he was doing.
I appreciate that. That was expressly the point, that is what I was trying to do. That was my goal, was that exact thing. We very much conceived of LA by Night as introducing vampire to a new generation of fans who had never played it before, didn't know anything about it. And I took very seriously that I would be the face of Clan Ventru for a new generation. And I wanted them to be something other than sleazy stockbrokers. And in the book, in the clan, so we started preparing for LA by Night before the new book came out. And when we finally got it, there is a section in the book that is a letter to a young Ventru. And when I got it and I read it, It's like it literally is talking about the fact that it's like just what it means to be a Ventru, and the last line of it is, "We're all watching, make us proud." And I remember getting like so emotional because I was like, "Man, I'm gonna try, I'm gonna try." And then I fast forward, I think I did so much so. This dice box was the very first piece of merchandise, literally first piece of merchandise printed with the new Ventru logo, and I have it. So I have been representing for us from the very beginning.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, they're one of my top clans for sure. I know that's kind of like saying you like multiple sports teams, like, you know,
You're allowed to. You are allowed to.
are you? Okay.
Mhm.
So maybe we should take a step back from there because it sounds like there's actually quite a bit before LA by Night. How did you get into Geek and Sundry and the actual play scene? I mean, was Critical Role was kind of the first transition from like the podcast format, right? Because that's what everyone, that was the only thing that was popular in the
Yeah, I mean,
20 teens.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of useless dick measuring about who was first. I think Critical Role definitely left the biggest footprint. And I had, when I came out here, the first movie I ever did, he's let me take a step back. The first person I ever met in Los Angeles was Jason Charles Miller. He makes a big point of that because I actually met him when I was still in Arkansas. And then in the very first movie I ever did, I met Damien Poitier. And then I introduced the two of them to each other. And in those days, I was still working a day job. Now, both of them deny this sequence of events, but this is how I distinctly remember it happening. Was both of them got over at Geek and Sundry, and I do think they got over there independently, and they were on the show Foreververse, which was one of their big TTRPG shows. And I still had a day job, and I remember just watching, being like, "These sorry sons of bitches wouldn't even know each other if not for me." And then they're off doing role playing games and stuff, and nobody called me. And um, one day in 2017, in March of 2017, Damien called me on a Wednesday and was like, "I have an idea for a show called Ask Your Black Geek Friend." And I was like, "Let's do it." And we shot the pilot that Saturday. Geek and Sundry told us they wanted it that Monday. And even though that was in March, the show didn't actually start until August. And that was my foot in the door. And they knew me as the talk guy. They didn't know I knew anything about TTRPGs until that charity thing. And then they saw what I could do. And then soon after that, did We're a Live Frontier, and then LA by Night, and then kind of haven't stopped since.
How complicated was it once the pandemic hit to kind of continue at the pace or with the plans you were going? Was everything more or less easy to smooth out, or did it throw a lot of wrenches in what you were in for project?
I have to be really careful about how I talk about the pandemic because obviously it was a very difficult time for a lot of people for a lot of different
For
reasons.
sure.
But for those of us in the content space, it was great because the world was home. And it just so happens I had already ramped up my production. So I had a couple of things that were already on YouTube right when the lockdown started. So it was very easy for me to be like, "Hey, can I interest you in a couple of 100 hours of free entertainment?" You know? And it was just massive, you know? So, um, individual seasons of individual shows definitely lapsed to like, with Vampire in particular, they never wanted to do heads and boxes. But I mean, for anything that pivoted, it was great. And in some ways, it was better because before that, heads and boxes content was really looked down upon
Yeah.
relative to being on set and being together. And having everybody sort of accept the heads and boxes allowed for casts to get together that never would have been possible. I mean, the cast of the Black Dice Society was all in a room together exactly one time. You know, like most of us lived in LA, but Tanya's in Chicago and DJ is in Texas and Mark is in Canada, you know? So if we had tried to have it be in person the entire time, that show never would have been that. So as a content creator, the pandemic was great. As a human, it was awful and I was traumatized like everybody else. But as a content creator, it was
Yes.
great.
Indeed. Yeah, I feel like that's where a lot of the tabletop role playing game scene got its big boom. I mean, it was already trending up, but
Yeah.
just so many people looking for something to do in their free time.
Yeah, looking for something to do in their free time, content to consume after they'd watched everything. And in fact, I think some of the contraction you're seeing now is because people don't have the luxury of just going out and, volunteering on somebody's show or sitting home and binging something for 200 hours. Because again, the world is available again.
So you went on to do Long Beach by Night.
Mhm.
You mentioned the Black Dice Society. Was there any point where the idea of these commitments to these actual plays became more work than it was fun, or did it? Were you able to keep the vibe of really just loving role playing games and being able to stay with it?
Well, anybody that tells you that, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life is lying to you. I mean, it's still work. It could just be fun work. I have never lost sight of what a blessing it is to get to do this. I came up through the satanic panic when these things were evil. And then I went through the period of where they were just lame. So when you're like, what do you mean somebody wants to watch me play D&D? What do you mean somebody wants to pay me to watch me play D&D? Like, what are you talking about? Like that would have been completely alien to me, utterly. It'd be like if somebody told you that, like, millions of people are going to want to watch you mow your lawn. You're like, what? Why? You know. So the fact that we get to do this is so incredible and amazing that it's like it's like that whole bad day fishing's better than a good day working type thing. Like,
Yeah,
even when it's difficult or stressful, because again, it is work. It's still been great the entire time, always.
yeah. I noticed more recently kind of that bigger trend of touring, kind
Hmm.
of like a concert,
Hmm.
right? Or a play.
Hmm.
And it reminds me of I had a similar thought to when esports was getting big in the 20 teens. And
Hmm.
it's like all of a sudden people are showing up at venues rather than watch a sport, they're watching esport. And it took me a little bit to wrap my mind around like, is that worth it though? And I kind of had the same thing with the actual plays when they started touring, but having it had a chance to sit in on a few, like it's such a fun experience. Like I can understand
Yeah,
why they're doing that now.
it's like going to the theater versus going to the movies.
Exactly. All right. What about any new projects that you're working on right now that you're allowed to talk about?
Well, that's the hard part. Well, I'm currently the dungeon master of the Yard D&D. 12 episode 11 of that just went up yesterday. And there's early access for people on the Patreon. So that's been very fun. And that's been getting a pretty huge reception. All the D&D and the castle stuff, of course. I'm about to head back to the castle here on the 30th. I'll be over in England for a couple of weeks running games. Beth the Bard and I have been working on some Vampire the Masquerade informational content that we're going to be announcing shortly. I don't want to say the wrong thing and have her get mad at me. Yeah, so mostly that.
Very cool. Very cool. And I have a couple of questions I try to run through with folks before closing up. First off, what is your favorite role playing game of all time?
Battle Lords of the 23rd century.
Oh yeah,
I love Battle Lords. Yes, it is like
awesome.
Aliens meets the Fifth Element. It is a very crunchy system, but the world and the setting, it has just been near and dear to my heart from the beginning. Actually think I started playing Battle Lords right after Rifts, even before D&D. And when the 6th edition came out a couple of years ago, I was fortunate to get to do some streaming content to help with the launch of that and become friends with the publishers, which has been nice. I've managed to contribute something to like every game that meant something to me, except Rifts. Except Rifts. It's got some horrific imbalance issues, but I mean, Kevin Symbieta, if you need a contribution, that'll be the final gem in my Infinity Gauntlet there of having done something for every game that I truly love. So
Speaking of Infinity Gauntlet, you did work on the more recent Marvel release as well, correct?
I'm like, oh, this whole thing. Yes, I did work on the Marvel Cataclysm of Kang. I also worked on the X-Men book back there. Yep, I wrote on both of those.
All right. And here's kind of a theoretical for you.
Mhm.
Let's say you have, kind of an unlimited scope of money, whatever resources are. What do you think that if you had to, assign that to producing in the actual play space,
Mhm.
where would you put it? what would you see changed, or what do you think is maybe being missed or not quite being
Well,
capitalized on?
I kind of put my money where my mouth is. I do it now. The number one most important thing when it comes to this kind of content is consistency. You have to put out enough stuff regularly that people can make it a habit, which is very important. In a lot of times, streaming is very expensive and it is very difficult to monetize. So you'll see people do 8 episodes and then be gone for a month, and then do 3 episodes and be gone for 4 months, and then do 2 episodes. And you're never going to find your footing like that. So being able to consistently put out a weekly show, you're halfway there already. In a perfect world, ideally, I love doing it live in the studio is my perfect thing. Second to that is pre-taped in the studio. Third to that, I guess, would be live heads and boxes. Fourth to that would be heads and boxes pre-taped. I feel like you get a different performance when it's happening in front of an audience, even a virtual one. Just the feeling of the whole thing's different. But again, scheduling is the
Yeah.
last boss of TTRPGs, so that's hard. That is the advantage of pre-taping, that you can get everybody together and get everything you need in the can. And it keeps all of the events and circumstances fresh in people's minds, because instead of having to think about what happened, last week or a couple of weeks ago, you're thinking about what happened today. Yeah. And I think having it be like super polished looking, it is the most important point is it should look good, but it is definitely possible to overproduce TTRPGs where it stops looking like a good TTRPG and starts looking like bad television, and that is
Right.
actually detrimental. But yeah,
That's very fair.
something that
Yeah,
would keep rolling. That would be the thing.
and that makes a lot of sense because that applies to tabletop role playing campaigns,
Mhm.
right? Like you take enough breaks, it can be an amazing game, but people start losing their interest if it's not consistent. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Again, they need to make it a habit. A quote that I learned early helped me a lot, even though a very terrible person said it. It was Vince McMahon right after the WWF at the time had acquired WCW. And I was watching an interview and somebody asked him, "Well, what are you going to do now that you don't have any more competition?" And his answer was, "The entire world's my competition. Anything else a person could be doing is my competition. They could watch football, they could go out to dinner, they could go for a walk, they could read a book, they could spend time with friends. I still have to do something and my product has to be good enough that people are going to stop what they're doing and pay attention to it." And I always brought that with me into the streaming space because I take very seriously that people are investing their time, which is literally their life. Especially because this stuff tends to be pretty long, 2, 3 hours. That's watching a movie, and you're watching, and then you're asking people to watch a movie every week. So I try to make sure I'm always offering something of value and of note and of consequence. You notice I will never have a shopping episode ever. Like, I mean, I'm moving the needle every single time. Now, a given episode may have more or less action or more or less role playing or more or less plot, but I do everything in my power to make every single time must see, because again, people are already giving us literally their most precious commodity. And I want to make sure it's worth it, a worthwhile investment.
Very well said. Shout out to all the GMs that are trying to make things happen with their games and their players. So,
Well, I'll say something that people hate to hear, because I just mentioned that scheduling is the last boss of D&D, and it does have tabletop, and it does become like the trope of like, oh, getting everybody together is so hard and blah blah blah. However, so during the pandemic, I was running games on my Patreon, and I ran between 35 to 40 games a month for about 18 months, which I don't recommend. That was I don't recommend it. But during that time, I had people getting up at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning their time, coming in on their birthdays, rushing home from work, playing on their lunch break, just doing anything they could do, moving heaven and earth to participate, because what they were going to experience was worth it. If you have a hard time getting your people to the table, the question you got to ask yourself is, well, what are you offering them? And I mean, time and tide happen to everybody. People get flat tires, get sick, babysitters cancel. But I mean, if it's like consistently a hard time getting people to stop and come to the table, look in the mirror and make sure you're creating an experience that is like can't miss. Because if you're creating a
yeah,
can't miss experience, they won't miss it.
exactly. And I think part of that is making sure that the show goes on,
Hmm.
right? A lot of people will put a pause when one player can't make it. I think when you do that, what you're signaling, even like subconsciously, is, oh yeah, there's no fear of missing anything.
Yep.
But if they know that they can't make it that one episode and all this shit goes down, all of a sudden they're like, that FOMO creeps in and they
Yep.
got to worry about what they're going to miss.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And we'll do something to adjust accordingly.
All right. Well, we're kind of at the end, but I wanted to give you a moment to shout out anything you wanted to shout out before we close.
I have my website, which is the undisputedacademy.com, where I teach my tutorial courses, where I teach you how to run games or play games or design games at a high level. 14-day DM, 14-day player, 14-day TTRPG creator, and 14-day writer. Um, Take a look at that. If you've come this far and you've been listening, you can have a discount code, which would be 14-day 50. You can get 50% off of anything that you find there. And I'm BDaveWalters on all the socials. My DMs are open. If you have any questions, hit me up. Ask me anything you want. And if you haven't checked it out, definitely take a look at the Yard D&D. It's been quite a lot of fun.
Thanks so much for your time.
All right. Thank you. Look at this dramatic fade out.